Hello, third graders. We are starting a new unit for measurement and data. And in this one, we are going to be using rulers to help us measure. This year, we're going to be learning how to measure objects using a ruler to the nearest fourth inch. And a fourth of an inch is also called a quarter inch. So let's review first some things that you've learned before: how to measure objects to the nearest whole inch and how to measure objects to the nearest half inch. So let's take a look right here, and let's just focus on measuring to the nearest whole inch. Now here you have a ruler, and on one side you see inches, and on the other side you see centimeters. So when we look at a ruler, things can be easy to measure that are at a whole inch. You see here, all you have to do is find where it stops, and you have 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. So for example, let's say we take our marker cap, and what we're going to do is we're going to line it up with the 0, and it is exactly 2 inches because I have the end lined up to the 0, and I look over here, it ends exactly at 2 inches. So if we're rounding to the nearest whole inch, we would say 2 inches. Now, if it's a little more or a little less, and it says to the nearest whole inch, you would always click or check 2 here, because even if it's a little more or a little less, the nearest whole inch would be 2. Same thing goes with half of an inch, but let's get a little bit closer in this ruler. Here, like we just talked about, we have our whole inches, and here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you guys know that between 1 and 0 is a half. So right here would be a half inch because it is between 0 and 1. And you can see the line is a little bit longer than these other lines. You can see here is another half, and another half. They're between the whole numbers. So for example, if we're measuring something and it goes to this point, we see that it is in between 1 and 2. So I'm going to circle this whole number. We know it's 1, but it's not all the way to 2 yet. So it would be 1 whole inch, and if it ends here, it would be another half. So if we have a measurement that ends right here, we would say that is 1 and 1/2 inches. Let's say we're talking about this point right here. Well, we look at the nearest whole number, and it's 3. So if my object goes from all the way to the 0 to this point, we see that 3 is the whole number, because we can't say 4 because it's not quite at 4 yet. So 3 is our whole number, and this is a half. It's in between 3 and 4. So we would say that this point right here is 3 and 1/2. Now that gets us into the quarter inches. Now before I show you the ruler of a quarter inch, what I want to talk about quickly is when we learned about fraction number lines. Now, I know fraction number lines were daunting, which means kind of scary, and you are all kind of dreading them. But when we learn fraction number lines, it can really help us when we're looking at these rulers. So we know that we started with 0, and our number lines ended with 1. And we just talked about that 1/2 is in the middle. But we're going to be talking about quarters or fourths. So what's going to happen in our ruler is we're going to be looking at it in fourths. So remember we talked about the bunny hops and how we start at 0, and that's how many times the bunny hops is what our denominator is going to be. 1, 2, 3, 4, which means that this is the first of 4 hops. This is 1/2, or the second of 4 hops. This point here is 3/4, the third of 4 hops. And last but not least, we have 1, which is the same as 4/4, 4 out of 4 hops. So this is going to help us when we're using our rulers today, because we are going to use those points to help us. So I'm actually going to use this ruler right here. And this ruler is also, you're able to print it if you have a printer off of one of the slides. I have a link to it. And this is a really great ruler to use because it is broken up into fourths for you. So for example, you can see the whole numbers here. You are able to see the half ones in between. So see how the lines get a little bit longer? And then next is those fourths. So let's just take a look at that first inch here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. That means that if this is 0 inches, this is 1/4 of an inch. We said that this one in the middle is 2/4, but we also say 1/2 of an inch. Now we go to the next line, 3/4, and then we have 1 whole. So let's try it again with the next inch. So we have 1 whole, then the first line would be 1/4, so that means at this point would be 1 1/4 inches. The next one would be 1 1/2 inches because it's in between 1 and 2. Next, we know that we are still in the inches, but this is the third out of 4 hops, 3/4. So 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, and then we get to 2. So when you're using your number line, look for what part we're looking at. Are you looking at the whole number 1? That's the longest line. Are we looking at the one in the middle? That one tells us the halfway point. Or are we looking at one of the quarters? Remember, quarter also means broken into 4, just like there are 4 quarters in a dollar. Now here's another ruler. This is my ruler, and you can see it has a little bit more lines, but it's still the same thing. You can see the nearest whole inch. You know that the middle one is the half, and then these would be your quarters. And these show 1 hop, 2, 3, 4. They show the 4 places that help you get to the nearest spot. So let's take a look at some examples of how to measure to the nearest inch, the nearest half inch, and the nearest quarter inch. This one says, which line is to the nearest inch? Well, we talked about we start at 0 in our measurements. Here's our line, and I'm going to make this just so I can see. And I see here that it stops at 7. I know we're talking about inches, so the length of this line would be 7 inches. Now let's see what this one says. It says, what is the length of the purple line to the nearest 4th inch? So remember, 1/4 of an inch is talking about the 1/4 or the 3/4, because both of those denominators have 4s. They're both in the 1/4 of an inch. So let's see here. I'm going to make sure it starts at the 0. It does. And I look to find the nearest whole number it's near. So I see it's between 3 and 4. It's not quite at 4 yet, so I know the nearest whole number is 3. Now, this point right here is in between 3 and 4, which means that that's a half. So that means that if these are the 4 spots, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, it's at this point right here, which means that this is the first line out of the 4 spots. So that purple line is 3 and 1/4 inches long. This one said, what is the length of the blue line to the nearest 1/2 inch? Okay, well, we can see here that it starts at 0, we know that, and now we're going to follow it down. Now I see that it's in between 8 and 9, so it's not quite at 9 yet. It's still at 8. So 8 is going to be our whole number. Now let's see where it falls. Okay, I see here that this is the first line, so 1/4. And this is the middle point. It's right in between 8 and 9, which means that it's at the 1/2. So the blue line is 8 and 1/2 inches. Let's try one more. This one is also to the nearest 1/2 inch, it looks like. I start at 0. I'm following my line and I see that it is between 5 and 6. So that means that this is the quarter, the first of 4 hops. This is the 1/2 right in between, and it looks like that's where that lands, right there at the 1/2. It also says it in my problem, the nearest 1/2 inch, which shows me that I am correct. 5 and 1/2 inches is the length of our green line. So before we end today, I want to go over one more type of problem. So earlier we looked at a marker cap to see how long it was. And, oh, I used a different ruler, let me find it. We see here, it's a different cap. It's so funny. They're different sizes, almost. Or it's the ruler. Oh no, this ruler is a little bit different size. These ones aren't quite to scale because they were printed, but just do your best for what we have to work with here. But if you look here, so if we actually on this one, we could see that this is probably closer to the nearest 3/4 of an inch, the nearest 1/4 inch. Because we see here that it's between 1 and 2, and it actually lands at this line right here. So that means that this is 1. 1 and 1/4, 1 and 1/2 because it's in between, and this would be 1 and 3/4 because it is the third of those 4 hops to 2. So I know that this marker cap is 1 and 3/4 inches long. Now sometimes you might get questions that are a little bit challenging. Instead of the marker cap being at the 0, which you know that's how you have to measure it, they're going to try to trick you. And they're going to try to move it to here. Now, I know the rules say that it needs to be at 0, but for some reason in this question, they started it here. So what your job is to do is to figure out, well, let's pretend that this now is 0. I know it says 3, but let's pretend it's 0. Let's try to figure out how long this marker cap is. Well, we know from 3 to 4 is 1 inch. And let's see how many. We know once again that this after 4 is 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4. So even though it says here, it looks like it's at 4 and 3/4 inch, it didn't start till we got to the 3. So if you need to, if these things aren't where they're supposed to be, your job is to try to figure out how long this object is. So we can see that when we start at 0, which if we were measuring, we always need to start at 0. But if they're trying to trick us and putting in a different spot, don't worry, it's okay, we can still figure it out. We just figure out where it starts and then figure out where it stops. And we can see here that that would be 1 inch between 3 and 4, and then 3/4 more of an inch. Good luck today. Please let me know if you have any questions. Print off those rulers if you need them. I'm not going to assign anything using these rulers because they are a little bit off in scale, but also I know not everyone has a printer and is able to print, so that's absolutely okay. You can just use the ones that are provided in the different activities. Good luck today, guys. Bye.